So I'm at the ferry terminal now waiting, and I reserved this ferry, but I probably would have made the earlier ferry had I not stopped for fudge. But the fudge was worth it. It was really good. So I'm sitting here and thinking that now is as good a time as any to extrapolate. And I was looking through some notes that I made, and I realized there was something else significant about finding the neuroscientists talking about how when we're in that emotional state, the blood is being diverted to that part of the brain. So we can't think cooperatively and creatively and all that jazz. And they were referring to it in terms of work. And I realized that I wrote down something about how I noticed when this man was speaking that when he spoke, the big artery in his neck puffed up. So it was like the blood wasn't flowing, it was stopped, so the artery actually blew up. So I was thinking that when we talk, the blood isn't flowing up to our brain. I don't know if that was really an artery or a vein, so I might say it backwards, but it seemed to me that the movement of the jaw stops the blood. So then there's this static blood in the brain. And then when we speak, those vibrations are going through our brain cells, and the brain cells are actually creating the vibrations for us to be able to speak, so it's one process. But then whatever waste products that are created by saying that go into the blood, and those waste products even temporarily bathe the brain. So what I'm saying is this speaking is somewhat mirrored in the physiological processes, and I didn't really know how that worked, and I don't, but I wrote it down, how it has something to do with when we're speaking, it's stopping the flow of blood, which isn't a bad thing. But what I'm saying is, why do we choose to say what we say? And why do we say what we say? And it's like each time we say something, there are waste products going into our bloodstream. And we're bathing ourselves in the vibrations of what we're saying, which have correlates of biomolecules, waste products of metabolism going into our brain in those areas of the brain that are being used to speak what we're speaking. So what I'm saying too is, if we're in that emotional space or amygdala is being bathed in blood, the emotional area of the brain is producing certain metabolites, which are then going into our blood and back to our heart and circulating around our whole body. So whatever brain state we're in, all those signals get sent through the whole body, and they get sent through the whole body through the nervous system too. But what I'm saying is, even if we're in a conscious state where we're maybe in our executive functioning, we're still using only a very partial area of our brain. We're using our past circuits, our self circuits, our me circuits. Why are we even saying these things? Why are we speaking in terms of like and dislike? Why are we regurgitating stuff from our memory in order to share? Why aren't we seeing something in the moment now? And the seeing in the moment now vibrates our brain cells, which then nourishes our whole body, and we can act accordingly. So I don't know if that makes any sense. It was interesting to think about it, how when we speak, it's keeping that blood in our brain temporarily or changing our brain circulation. And what we're speaking as or about is sending blood to that area of the brain. So I could speak about me and my sad story, or I could speak about the beauty in the moment, and that's going to nourish different areas of the brain. I'm seeing something else. I'm either seeing my past and speaking as it, or I'm seeing something beautiful in this moment now and speaking as that, and that would, in my mind, increase blood flow to the now circuits of the brain. And so if we speak about possibilities, then perhaps that puts blood into the possibility circuits of the brain. And as we're speaking those possibilities, we're bathing the brain and our being and our body in the resonance of speaking in possibilities in our own voice. And I was thinking about on the drive how speaking to oneself out loud in these possible ways, in the ways of possibility, for 1 hour a day or half an hour a day or however long, is way more powerful than chattering on in the brain to oneself, supposedly, all day long. And maybe speaking in this way to oneself reduces mind chatter. I don't know, because I got rid of most of that a long time ago, before I engaged in this process, but it could be possible. Because then one is speaking in possibilities, seeing in possibilities, not in possibilities, seeing possibilities, speaking possibilities, moving in that domain of possibilities, and not being moved by the projections of the past as much. So when we talk, it blocks the carotid artery, and the vibrations change the brain cells, and the wastes of that metabolism are dumped into the blood. Not only that, as we speak and the blood flow is somewhat blocked, where does the blood get diverted in the brain? And the shunt of that, the switch of that, is what we're saying. So what I'm seeing as I'm saying this is that our voice, the vibration of our own voice, is what chooses the choice of where to direct the blood flow in the brain as we speak. I could be speaking about the past, it's going into the past circuits. I could be speaking about possibilities, it's going into the possibility circuits and bathing the brain in that way. Or I could be speaking about my emotions, so the blood's going to my emotional centers. And it's not only bathing the brain cells in that, but it's making them more congealed together, making it more into a story. And when I'm seeing and thinking in stories, I'm not seeing and meeting the moment. And the moment is life. And if we're thinking about the past, the blood's going into those brain cells where the memories are stored. Those brain cells vibrate and then start to project interference patterns as they have stored the memories holographically, and then that projects the images and sounds, which overlays the moment and makes the moment now, which is new, old and about the past, which it's not. And then our discomfort is that we're living in that which is not. And we're looking for that which is right in front of us, within us, through us, as us. The common word is us. We become insensitive to the moment because we're wasting our energy living in our projections. We have brain cells designed to be in touch with this moment now, but the blood is so busy flowing to the brain circuits that would project memories that we've recorded. And we record them because we feel like they'll be adequate for later recognition to help us move in life. But then we move in our recognition of the past. And the universe and Gaia and the cosmos respond to gestures just as technology does. And technology has for the last 100 years maybe, but the universe has always and will always respond to our gestures. Gestures of life towards life, to augment life, to augment actuality. And in learning this, as we gesture, those gestures are mirrored in our brain and send blood flow to those areas of the brain to increase our dynamic range of gestures. So it's not just our voice that is a tool of that, but also our gestures, which are our hands, our whole body movement, and our eyes seeing. We need to see something accurately to gesture accurately towards it. So we have our body, our gesturetic apparatus, our somatic apparatus that can transmit significance through its movements. And its movements are indicative of the significance that it's moving in, which is indicative of the level of perception. So we create significance through the perception action of our somatic gesturetic apparatus. The soma is a unit of perception action, and the significance of perception is informed by and on the soma, and it's a cycle. And in this way, we can gesture in more significance. We can create and gesture more meaningful actions. And I was on the Complete Coherence website again for the Coherence Breathing app, and they have a cool mission page. They say that their mission is to upgrade our fundamental operating system. And I feel like Map Consciousness gives us the blueprint of that, but it's up to us to gesture in that significance through our somatic apparatus and change our neurology to be neurofluid. And the fluidity is partly perception. We're always perceiving something different, which changes where the blood flow goes in the brain. And we're also speaking differently. We're not speaking the same old stories over and over of the recordings of our memory, and so it's fluid. Our voice is fluid, our movements are fluid, our perception is fluid. And they said they run a crowdocracy, which is unlocking the wisdom of the people in the company. Well, I feel like this is a manicocracy to unlock the wisdom of that creative space, that peak experience of mania, and bring it into our lives to share with the world. We're metabolizing the past. We're sending the blood to the brain area that is about the past, speaking those things, thinking those things. Those vibrations are reinforcing the brain cells, and we continue to see the past. The anabolic process is building more brain cells about the past, and the waste products that come out are about metabolizing the past. And the past is full of problems. The new knows no problems. The other thing that diverts blood flow, and this is a reciprocal process, is not seeing the moment now. So what we're paying attention to is where the blood flows in our brain. If we're paying attention to the actual moment, like an actual flower right now, then blood's going in to augment those areas of the brain. The sensitivity to nature, to beauty, to the moment now, which is beauty. The moment now is beauty. And if the blood is going into the past circuits and we're living in that, it follows that we're not seeing the moment. So we're either in those past circuits or future desire circuits or whatever, not present, which implies blindness. We're not seeing the now, so we're not seeing what is and augmenting the ability to see and be and perceive and be in touch with what is now. And one might think, well, life isn't all about looking at beautiful flowers. But the more one is with what is with nature, one can be with what is no matter what. And then the what is acts on and through us. We're not acting or reacting based on what was. So if we can see, if our eyes are looking at this moment, what's right in front of us, what's important is seeing. Let the moment create our brain. Let the moment be our brain. Seeing now is all that matters. It's what creates matter. It's what creates the matter of our brain, the gray matter. And it doesn't take time. It takes this moment now. It takes this moment now. It makes this moment now. We must create our brains to act in the now, on the now, with the now, as the now. As if now is all that matters. We must sensitize our brains to creating with the light of the now. To not pick out the pixels of the past. So I realized something important after reading something that Krishnamurti said. And he was saying that that state of perception and action is very similar to when we perceive danger and we act. So if we see a snake, we act immediately. We don't think about it, we don't ponder about it, we don't abstract about it, we act. And this is hard to explain, this is hard to extrapolate from my brain, but I remember making up to go with fight, flight, or freeze, or feign, I think is the other one. Feign being injured. I created another category, which is free. Being free of mechanized thought, and that's what happens, I feel, in map consciousness. So in mania, we're free, and it feels beautiful and magical. And one wouldn't necessarily attribute that space with the space of fight or flight. Yet it's exactly the same in that we're perceiving and acting immediately. So generally, our brain reserves that time of perceiving and acting immediately when it's an emergency. But that also happens in map consciousness, which is also called spiritual emergence or emergency sometimes. It's a state of deep perception action that we have access to, that we also have in the peak of ecstasy. So we have it in the peak of emergency, the peak of danger, and we get a peek into it in that we move so quickly without thinking, like when we touch a stove that's hot. But this peak state, this ecstasy, is the same. We touch the universe and we're immediately moved by it. It's perception action. And I never quite understood what Krishnamurti said when he was saying that it's a state like when you perceive the danger of a snake, but at the same time it's not felt like danger. The way we move in ecstasy is the same as we move in fight or flight, in immediate danger. It's immediate action. The equivalent is that in that ecstatic state, when we're not moving based on projecting patterns of thoughts and ideals, it's perceiving and in touchness with the universe and immediate action. As if we were in danger, but we're not. We're in direct contact. Just like when we look at something and there's a calculation that we need to act now, we're in direct contact with it. So how this relates is, I've often talked about how we're in that space of map consciousness and we're starting to reattach or be captured by the energy of thought in the past and the patterns of the ego and the self and all the images we have about ourselves and others have about us. And since we're in this space in map consciousness of direct perception and action, and in mania it feels blissful, as we're reconnecting to thought algorithms and the past and not moving in this creative way, since we're in this direct space of direct perception and action, when we're reattached to thoughts in the past, it associates that state with immediate danger. So it then projects a million stories and reasons why we should feel like we're in immediate danger. But again, it's the thought, past projection, algorithm, mechanism coming back online and reestablishing itself. And since it's a mixed state, thought only knows that direct perception and action as I'm in immediate danger, because through all of humanity, the only time we really do act like that is when we are in immediate danger. But then we're in a space of a couple weeks or a couple days or a couple months of acting directly based on perception in the moment without the thought algorithm, and that equals ecstasy, that equals flow. Movement without the self, the no self state, the sense of timelessness, effortlessness, richness, beauty, selflessness, which is direct perception and action, which we usually reserve for fight or flight. But it's also the same as flow. Just like there's a very fine line between pleasure and pain can easily turn to pleasure and vice versa, and pain can be pleasurable to some people, it's subjective. We go from personal subjectivity to radical subjectivity, and it's a very fine line. And so also that space of action is as intense as if we were in extreme danger, but we're in extreme creativity, extreme flow, overflow. And I don't know if I really explained that, but it makes sense to me. And one last thing that really resonated was something I read on page 19 of Krishnamurti's book, Meeting Life. And he was talking about intelligence and how intelligence can use thought. But then he alluded to how intelligence can get captured by thought. And this resonated with me because that's how I've described this process of mania leading to so-called psychosis, where we're getting recaptured by the old, by thought. Even being indoctrinated into psychiatry is being indoctrinated into a system of thought, into a way of seeing and thinking about life. So it seems like he's saying that thought can capture this intelligence, and anyone who's been in that state of so-called mania probably has a sense that there's an intelligence there. There's some kind of different algorithm that is not the one we live by in our habitual, monotonous, routine existence. It gets us out of routine. But then it's challenging because our society's not designed by way of operating based on intelligence. It's designed in operating based on thought. So we're moving with this intelligence temporarily, but surrounded and immersed in a sea of thought and people thinking thoughts. And we want to share how this way of being feels meaningful, but we're surrounded by the old memes and thoughts of the design of the world. So I thought it was interesting that he said that thought can capture intelligence. So intelligence can use thought, but thought can capture intelligence. So is there a way to not be recaptured by thought? And I feel one way is self-dialogue, because I've been able to create a lot of meaning and context that seems to act as a buffer to keep out thoughts. So if the most prominent psychiatrist in the world came up to me and said, hey, you've been in the psych ward 5 times, you were diagnosed with bipolar disorder 1, you should be on these drugs, I'd say, get lost. I wouldn't take that to heart. I wouldn't buy it. It wouldn't even touch me. It's not a matter of believing it or not believing it. It's a matter of creating my own perceptions, which creates matter in my brain. Which then allows me to meet that matter in daily life and not meet the matter that I would meet if I believed and subscribed to the memes of psychiatry. That would have me meeting up with psychiatrists and clinicians. Instead, I meet the mountains and the ocean and this carrot. And I remember Dr. David Hawkins saying in one of his talks, this does not cause that. A does not cause B. But this creates the necessary preconditions for A, B, C to arise. So can our own voice and our own perceptions speak our life into possibility? Can that be the necessary preconditions to unfold a life that's meaningful as us?